Hi, so this is Jenna, the Women's Caucus Chair for Young Democrats of North Carolina. And today we're interviewing North Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture candidate Jenna Wadsworth.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me, Jenna.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it, and you're an amazing candidate, so it's really. So to jump into the questions, what are some issues that women face, particularly in rural areas?
So first, I just think it's important for folks to know that I am a woman from a rural area, so I truly do empathize with women who are living that experience. Again, my name's Jenna Wadsworth, and I'm our Democratic nominee for North Carolina Commissioner of Agriculture. And I actually grew up on a hog, cow, chicken, corn, cotton, tobacco, and soybean farm on a dirt road in Johnston County. My grandmother, my grandfather died pretty early on in my life, and then I watched my grandmother have to run our farm, and she did a phenomenal job doing that while also putting her family first and leading with her values. And so I learned so much from that experience, but I also saw how hard it can be for folks in rural areas in general, but especially women. A lot of women do end up being the majority of like second generation farm owners. So in a lot of cases, after their husbands or their brothers or fathers or anything else died, they're the one left running the farm. And we need to make sure that these women have the resources that they need in order to do that successfully. And part of that means making sure that our North Carolina Department Division, the non-traditional farms division, has the funding necessary to actually support women and non-traditional farmers in agriculture in the state. Some of the other issues that rural women face, I think in general, and I talk about this a lot on my campaign when I talk about bridging the urban-rural divide, are the same issues that most rural folks face in kind of seeing some of those disparities in the lack of access to technology and in the lack of access to high quality healthcare. So that's part of the reason I talk about making meaningful investments in rural broadband access, because the reality is if you don't have the access to technology to compete in the statewide or global marketplace, you largely can't. I've also seen women use that technology, the ones that do have it available to them, incredibly effectively in order to reach out to their customer base. And in a lot of ways, they're better at it than most male farmers that I've seen do it. There's this one flower farmer down in Pender County, and she does an absolutely extraordinary job broadening her customer base, appealing to her clientele, letting folks know when she's going to be at what farmers market. But she also has these beautiful daughters, and they're on the social media pages a lot too, and you see what it's like life on her farm with the ducks and the piglets and everything else, and so you feel like you've built a relationship with her. And so I think that there's a way that we can give all of these rural women, these female farmers and producers, the access to technology, but also teach them how to effectively use it in order to expand their economic power, right? And we know that right now that purchasing power, that economic power, is something really, really important when you talk about power and status in society as a whole. And so if you want to see rural women businesses. And then the last thing I'll say is on that rural healthcare piece, just like with technology, if you don't have access to tech to proper and adequate healthcare, it's very hard to contribute economically to our society if you're not healthy. And so making sure that we expand Medicaid, making sure that we destigmatize mental health in rural areas, that we make sure that there are an adequate number of healthcare providers in rural areas is incredibly important in order to address some of those other disparities that we're seeing rural women face.
Yeah, that was awesome. Why did you decide to run for office?
So besides for growing up on the farm, and I think that, all those wonderful experiences, I didn't even realize until after I left home. And I left home the summer after my sophomore year of high school. I got a state grant to do coastal geology research, so I stayed at UNCW that that summer. And then I went to the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics in Durham for my junior and senior year of high school. So yes, I'm a unicorn. And I actually sit on their board of directors now because I know that public education is the key to opportunity in the society. It is, in a lot of places, the kind of great equalizer, the only type of stepping ladder you see to opportunity for folks. So we absolutely have to invest in public education. And so I have all of these sort of values, these agricultural values, these values about education. And when I was in college, I actually am really grateful to have some very strong female mentors. One of which, Danielle Adams, she at that time was either the youngest or one of the youngest women elected in North Carolina, and she served on the Durham Soil and Water Board, and she knew that there was a seat coming open on the Wake County Soil and Water Board. And she mentored me and encouraged me to get involved and help train me, and as well as her mom, who was actually Stella Adams, who was actually the first African-American female to ever serve on any soil and water board in the state. So I feel very lucky to have their support and guidance and mentorship. And ultimately, I ended up running for that open seat in Wake County. I was a junior in college, and we actually made history that year. I became the youngest woman ever elected to any political office in the state of North Carolina at the age of 21. I turned 22 a couple weeks later, so right before I was sworn in. I said it was the best birthday present a girl could ever ask for. And I have been elected 3 times so far countywide here, and have been proud to serve the 1.2 million people who call Wake County home. And we've done all these progressive, innovative, exciting things that had never been done before in this office. And when I looked at what was happening statewide in an industry that's so important to me, especially one that I'm still very personally involved in as someone who's, I have 45 rows of fruits and vegetables I planted this season alone with my dad on our family farm. And I know that a lot of young people are apprehensive about going into agriculture as a career because it's one of the hardest jobs there is out there, and there isn't much hope that the industry is going to be welcoming for them, or that there really is going to be much of an industry as we move forward, unless we see real pragmatic progressive change coming into that office and doing something to move agriculture into this century. And so when I looked at kind of the failures of the current leadership, I've looked at what Steve Troxler could have done for the last 15 years and largely hasn't. And farmers are in a worse place now. We're facing increased storms and natural disasters. We're seeing farmers going bankrupt, and as a result of that, farmers committing suicide at one of the highest rates we've ever seen. We're seeing issues with technology and connectivity. We're seeing major disruptions in the food system, especially as a result of COVID. It just kind of shined a spotlight on all of the things that were already wrong, or that we've allowed to be subsidized in the food industry as a whole. And to help our small farmers, to help our farm workers, to help the undocumented workers who are at our meatpacking plants and are contracting COVID at an even higher rate right now. There are all of these things that we can do, in addition to talking about social justice, economic justice, and environmental justice through this office. And so ultimately, I decided that I was ready to take the fight to the state level, because if not me, then who? And we shouldn't have to keep waiting around for that change that we're eager to see. We should just step up to the plate and make it happen. Because, I mean, if you just keep waiting, nothing's going to change. And so we have an opportunity to do something really special here. And I've been so grateful to have the support of so many North Carolinians. And that's really what this has been. The second quarter fundraising reports recently came out, and we outraised a 15-year incumbent by more than a 3-to-1 margin. And over 99% of my donations, or something like 99% of my donations, came from individuals. And so our average donation size was something like $70 compared to his was over $800. So there's, we're sending a message that individuals, farmers, regular folks, everyday folks are hungry for change in North Carolina. And right now, this department is being led by someone who cashes corporate campaign checks, and he largely lets those industries set the agenda in the Department of Agriculture, and people are tired of it. People are tired of it. So I'm just really excited because we're doing something special here.
I'm so glad that you decided to run also.
Thank you.
So speaking a little more on that, what policies do you want to enact, and what issues are you most passionate about?
So supporting our small family farmers, right? That's the biggest reason why I'm doing this, because they don't have a voice in the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. Again, my opponent he's taking corporate PAC money. I have made a pledge not to take corporate PAC money. He is cashing those checks from big oil, from Monsanto, from big chemical and fertilizer companies, the very companies and industries he's supposed to be regulating, by the way, in addition to those corporately owned farms. And I know that North Carolinians deserve better, and I'm ready to fight for small farmers, create these local food systems that work. There are still something like 49,500 farms in North Carolina, and they're situated on nearly 8.4 million acres. This industry, and I know it's really hard for a lot of folks if you live somewhere like an urban area where you don't see much farmland anymore, but this is still our state's biggest industry, and agriculture contributes something like 92.7 billion with a B dollars to the North Carolina economy per year, and employs over 772,000 people in some way, shape, or form. So it's so important that we have someone leading this industry who shares our values and our vision for the future, and doing so means looking at a more sustainable future, a more equitable future, a more just future for every single person. And so when I talk about supporting small farms, that also means creating new revenue sources and economic opportunities like hemp and marijuana. It also means talking about climate change in a meaningful way. I know it's real, my opponent does not. He wavers on whether or not it exists, which is sort of mind-blowing. It is 2020, and he actually kind of hails himself as a hero for getting Democrats and Republicans in the legislature to agree to cut relief checks to farmers after the last few major storm events. And I don't know about you, but I think that writing relief checks should not be our only solution to dealing with a natural disaster. And so I want to build sustainability and resiliency into our farm plans. I want to look at vertical grows, regenerative ag, soil health, best management practices, conservation friendly practices, looking at organic grows. I mean, there's so many exciting, innovative things that we can do. And I want to create a division within the North Carolina Department of Agriculture to handle and to address climate change. And that's something that's pretty easy to do. And I think that would go a far way in changing hearts and minds in the agricultural space. Maybe some people that are reluctant to use the words climate change, but they know something's happening because their yields aren't the same. They're not as productive as they used to be. They're always worried about the next weather event. And, right now, actually, we're going through what may be a hurricane coming our way. And that, coupled with a pandemic, could be absolutely dire for the agricultural industry. And so I'm someone that believes that leadership starts at the top. And so until we have a leader sitting in this office who is ready to unapologetically address climate change from day one, nothing's going to change. And this is an industry that sorely needs for things to change, because until we address climate change, farmers are going to continue facing those issues that are causing them to go bankrupt. And then that in turn is causing them to commit suicide or, make some really awful choices that they shouldn't be faced with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great. And you spoke some on the use of hemp and marijuana. If North Carolina were to legalize the use of marijuana, what's your plan to ensure that communities that have been disproportionately affected by its illegality reap the benefits of legalization?
Great question, and one that is very important to me. So when I talk about helping our small farmers, and I kind of saw this path through the legalization of cannabis, and I want to see it legalized both medicinally and recreationally. And for those who don't know, it's already legal in 33 states plus DC, so either medicinally, recreationally, or a combination thereof. So it's not really a question of if it's going to become legal here, it's more of a question of when that's going to happen. And although we've been sitting on our hands while we've let the propensity of other states legalize, I think, now we have the opportunity to look at what's been done right and what could have been done better by other states and use that to help craft an equitable cannabis industry here. And I say that for a few different reasons. Now, first, I love the idea of legalization for our farmers because it's a huge economic opportunity. A lot of those farmers that used to be tobacco farmers could easily transition into this market. It's very similar in a lot of ways. And we lost about 98% of our tobacco trading market to China in the last few years. So it's really important that we give these farmers an opportunity so they don't lose the farm that a lot of them grew up on, and they don't lose their opportunity to do what they love to do, which is farm. And so it's a huge economic opportunity for them. It's also an opportunity to expand rural travel and tourism. And that would be really helpful to those mom and pop shops or local bed and breakfasts owned in these areas where we're going to have kind of marijuana tourism, because that's a very real thing. It also is a way to increase our tax base here statewide. So if you look at what Michigan and Illinois were able to do just in the first couple months of legalization this year, the amount of money that they brought in, I mean, you're just talking millions and millions of dollars in additional taxes that went towards the state. And that money, it's really important to me that we make sure and find a way to see that it's funding the things that are important to us, because I'm someone who believes that our budgets should absolutely reflect our values and priorities in society. And when I look at that, again, this goes back to public education and the importance of funding public education, this access to opportunity for all folks. And Republicans in the legislature, I think it's no real secret that in order to outwardly avoid raising taxes, how do they then pay for things when they weren't doing that? Well, part of the time they were borrowing and stealing from the state lottery fund, which was supposed to be set up to help fund education in this state. So as someone who has educators in my family, who's been endorsed by the North Carolina Association of Educators, it's really important to me to make sure that we're supporting our public schools and our public school children and educators who are working so hard every single day. And cannabis legalization is a way to do that. It's also a way to begin to combat the opioid epidemic that's facing so many rural families throughout the state. And what I'm honestly the most excited about is the fact that legalization is an opportunity to begin to achieve true social justice for communities of color who for too long have been disproportionately impacted, by possession charges compared to Caucasian users, even though, for instance, Black people, white people use marijuana at roughly the same rate. But you're seeing Black men sitting in prison. Right now, they're more likely to contract COVID-19 as a result of that for doing something that, by the way, is legal in the majority of states across this country. So you can't tell me that there's not an equity and social justice issue there, because there absolutely is. And so when it comes to legalization, for me, it's really important that that also goes along with and comes hand in hand with decriminalization and dismissal of past misdemeanor possession charges. Because I think, that's the way that we go about beginning to combat and break down that school to prison pipeline that's really plaguing entire communities and keeping children from having two parents at home, or keeping children from having access to other opportunities. And so this is a way to do right by so many folks in our state who have been unjustly treated by sentencing laws that disproportionately affect Black and brown folks. The court system is already extremely overburdened. Everybody will tell you that. And so if you can cut down on some of these unnecessary charges, that will also go a long way to help with our court system. And a lot of times people who can't afford private representation, they end up with a public defender who is doing all they can, but their case ends up getting pled out. And so that's when you see these folks sitting in prison at a disproportionate sentence than someone else. So there's so many ways that we can begin to talk about combating that economic and social justice piece. And then the other thing is when we do legalize and when we have our farmers growing this, it's really important to me that it isn't just corporate out-of-state interests that can come in and benefit from this, especially, like I said, all these farmers that have started going bankrupt or land that's for sale. I want to make sure that it's actually our small farmers that call North Carolina home that benefit. I don't know if that means maybe there's an acreage allotment or something else. We have to figure that out. We're looking through, right now, I know our team is looking through everything that's being done in other states to figure out what makes the most sense. And we have folks that are experts helping us craft that policy. I believe in talking to scientists and experts and people who do this work every day. They know best. And then I would also love to see places that are like the dispensaries or the stores. I would love to see us really look at working with and partnering with historically underutilized businesses. So businesses that are owned or run by minorities or women in some of these places throughout North Carolina. So that way we really do spread the wealth around and create an equitable industry that works for everyone.
That's fantastic. And speaking some on small farmers, how can we ensure that small farmers can keep their farms afloat while having to deal with larger corporate farms that make it harder for small and medium farms to survive?
So I think that for so long in this country, we have subsidized the wrong things. We as Americans have become accustomed to cheap, quick, and easy when it comes to our food. And we don't really know the value that we should be paying for a gallon of milk or a dozen eggs or a loaf of bread. And in fairness, it would be hard to ask most folks to pay an extra dollar or two for those kitchen staples because wages have largely been stagnant since the 70s in this country. And so if we want to actually support these small farmers who are producing things in an ethical and sustainable and morally sound way, which I want to encourage people to do, think of your farmers markets like your grocery stores, right? Go get as much as you can there. It's a higher quality product, it's more nutritious, and you're also supporting local jobs there. But if we're going to do that, we have to have a North Carolina Department of Agriculture that actually wants to work with and support those small farmers instead of just taking checks from those corporate farms that are the ones that have all the political power, the lobbying power on the federal level, the people who are setting the rules for the food and agriculture industry as a whole. And right now, that industry is a little corrupt and a little dirty, and it doesn't have to be, right? And that's about putting someone in this office who has the same priorities that we do. And as someone who came from a small farm who would love to be able to have a future doing that, that's something that really matters to me. As I've talked to farmers throughout the state, Democrats, Republicans, independents, a lot of these small farmers, they all want the same things, right? They want the ability to do what they love to do. They want to be able to keep their farm. They want to be able to make a little money doing it. They're not greedy. They're not asking for much. They know they don't expect the moon. But they do deserve to be paid fairly, compensated fairly for the hard work that they're doing to make sure that we have food on our tables and clothes on our backs. And most of these folks just want to be good neighbors, and they want to be good stewards of the environment. Most farmers really are conservationists. They understand that if they don't take care of the land can't take care of them and be productive for years to come. And I think that's what really hurts, is that these corporate farms, these CAFOs, as you hear, the controlled animal feeding operations that you're starting to see pop up all over the place, they care less about the environment and the natural resources or their neighbors. And they can just tie you up with litigation or stay in court forever because they have a whole team of attorneys to make that possible. They don't care about people. They care about profits. And what I really hate is that in a lot of ways, because Steve Troxler, because the folks and Donald Trump, they've allowed these dirty, nasty industries to be able to really kind of control the messaging for all of agriculture. And I feel like a lot of farmers' reputations have been denigrated because of a few bad actors. Most farmers just want to be good neighbors. I mean, even a lot of the farmers who have now signed contracts with Prestige or Tyson or Smithfield Foods, all of these farmers, a lot of these farmers, they had no other choice because they didn't have an advocate who actually wanted to support small farms. And so if they don't want to go bankrupt, if they don't want to lose the land that's been in their family forever, that they worked day and night and toiled away to be able to And they watched as their neighbors had to sell out to these big corporate entities, and then they couldn't compete with their neighbors because if you're a smaller farmer, the reality is it costs more to produce a higher quality product. And you don't have the benefits of all these like corporate, these kind of corporate shortcuts that you can take. And so it's very hard not to sell out too when all of your neighbors have, because you can't charge more for whatever for that hog. And so they feel like they have no choice but to sign these contracts with the bad boys. And largely Steve Troxler is okay with it because he continues to cash checks from those parent companies. Farmers deserve better. And so if you want to change the food system, you've got to change the person who is running and leading the industry that controls your food system. And there are some great examples throughout North Carolina of local food systems working, and not just working, but making customers happy and doing social good for the communities, but also making money. And so people who say that like small farmers and like local food systems can't be economically productive or create like some sort of actual revenue streams, they don't know what they're talking about. They just want they just want to keep us from seeing that this is successful. The Blue Ridge Women in Agriculture run something called the High Country Food Hub in Boone, and they are doing some amazing work. There's all of these groups throughout North Carolina that are really impressive and that are working very hard to show that we can support local, we can support stuff that's been morally, ethically, and sustainably produced. And I will absolutely be prioritizing that as your commissioner.
That's great. I love to hear how invested you are in social and economic justice. Those are issues that mean a lot to me too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add about yourself or your campaign?
Well, just a few things. So I just want to thank all the members of the Young Democrats for your investment in the 2020 elections and for all of the hard work that you've done up to this point and all of the work that you will do to make sure that we see our folks voting in this election. This is the most important election of our lives. It is so crucial that we turn out the vote, that we work hard to make that happen. I don't want us looking back a few days after this election, because we're not going to know the results of the election on election night as a result of this and the number of mail-in ballots. But I don't want any of us to be looking back and regretting that we didn't just make, a few more phone calls, that we didn't just email or text a few more of our friends saying, hey, have you requested your absentee ballot yet? Or, hey, do you know if you're registered to vote? And if so, what's your plan? Make a plan to vote. And make sure you share that plan with someone else so that way we can hold you accountable. And so it's so important to really realize the power that we as young people have. And if we all voted, millennials, Gen Z, we can make up one of the largest voting blocks in American history. We would have real political power. And people like my opponent are counting on the fact that we won't show up, right? Or that we won't get involved, or that we won't roll up our sleeves and really give a damn. But we absolutely should, and we have the power and potential to do that and to literally change seats. I know in my race, knowing that we can get folks who traditionally don't vote for this race or skip it on their ballots, we could literally change the outcome of an election. So I need folks to show up so that way we can get to work on legalizing cannabis. So that way we can talk about local food systems. So that way we can begin to work to feed the 1 in 5 children that are hungry in North Carolina, which is an absolute crime in a state that grows so much of the nation's food. So that, we can be addressing climate change in a meaningful way. So we can be talking about our farm workers and helping them to find a pathway to citizenship, a morally sound pathway to citizenship. So we can go about supporting our undocumented workers in our meatpacking plants. There's so many things that we can do, but I need people's help to make that happen. And so if people want to know more about me, my website is jennawadsworth.com. You can also follow me on Insta and Twitter or Facebook. All of our social media links are on our website. And if you're interested in interning or volunteering, you can also reach out to us too, because we're always looking for bright, talented folks who are passionate about changing changing our future for the better. So thank you so much for having me. And I really do believe in the power of young people. And I think that together we can bring about real positive change this November.
And thank you so much for participating too.
Thank you.